Hello, everyone. This is a call. And what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about Kundalini. And I want to talk about how you could see this potentially in someone's astrology chart. Now, this idea, this concept is, I feel like it's well worked through if you read a lot of astrology texts. I particularly, where I got this information was from evolutionary astrology. However, I think the concepts are still there, and I'll get into that in a moment as to why you can perhaps see the Kundalini in someone's chart and what specifically to look at. But first off, I need to define Kundalini. So Kundalini is we'll just say the energy that is awakened as the individual becomes more aware, more conscious, more mindful, and integrated into the form. So as I perceive it, there is no Kundalini awakening without the integration into the body. That's essential here because it's within the body is where the subconscious lies. So how does this work? Basically, and keeping in mind that my background is yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, things along those natures. So I have a very physical path. And so for me, as my awareness started to wake up in life, I started to feel a lot of discomfort. And it was emotional in nature on some level, but it was primarily physical. Like I felt it very, very physically, which in a lot of ways was simply blocked emotion. I understand that. So, but these, what was it that was causing me the discomfort? What was it that was blocking the emotions? Well, it was simply because I'm repressive by nature. I tended to move very, very quickly through life, and I tended to block things. I blocked emotions because I didn't have time to deal with them in the moment. And I think a lot of you probably watching this video can relate. So what ends up happening is that the emotion, if not resolved, it will lie within the field. And again, everything is a bit like an echo. If there's some energy that is lying in the field that's waiting to be released, and if it is not released, it also manifests in the body. And it can manifest in the body as a tension, a discomfort, a dis-ease, any of a number of ways it can manifest. So that's ultimately what is blocking us from integrating into our body, because a trauma, discomfort, pain, fear, suffering separates the ego, the mind, the personality, whatever you want to refer to it. It'll create a separation from the body, a detachment. I know personally, by the time I turned about 28, I felt relatively numb to life in general, in my body, a great deal other than the pain, right? So now here's the interesting thing that happens is as someone starts to meditate, as someone starts to operate with more awareness, and again, this doesn't happen overnight, it takes a long time, but as we start to become more aware, we start to awaken, we start to perceive the energies of the body, we start to honor the energies of the body, we start to function utilizing our intuition, then what ends up happening is that, well, one is we stop creating more traumas. Intuition is here to guide us through life, generally trauma free if we know how to honor it. So, but part of this process is we cease to create traumas, we start to release bound up energy. And that has to do, well, there's a lot of ways to release bound up energy. Like some people will say that forgiveness will set you free, because it does. It does. If you're holding some sort of mental attitude about somebody, something, or whatever it may be, and then you forgive them, and sometimes you have to do this repeatedly, but then eventually that energy will release and it will cease to limit. So hopefully you kind of understand that. So this Kundalini energy lies coiled up at the base of the spine. It's at your root. It's not sex. It's not sexual energy, okay? It is a root. And it's also sexual energy because it's also all the other types of energy as well. So, but basically what ends up happening is as we start to integrate into the body, which is a movement downward. So it's all the way down to the root. This is the furthest possible point, right? Because your root basically extends down to your feet. So this is the furthest possible point, which the ego has to travel, because the seat of the ego is essentially here. So it has to travel back into the body through feeling and sensing, through being open and aware and conscious. And again, what ends up happening is that the body will start to, well, the subconscious rather, will interpret the movement of the ego back into the form through feeling and sensing as the opportunity to then release trauma, right? So as trauma is released, this energy which sits coiled up at the base of the spine, my hands look really dry, get some lotion. So, what ends up happening is that this energy will start to awaken, and it starts to kind of percolate upward. Okay, so essentially, as this energy starts to percolate upward, another association with Kundalini is fire, right? So this fiery energy starts to burn off our past karma, our past traumas, et cetera, et cetera. And this awakening process can sometimes be detected in the body as heat. But for me, it was not only heat, it was inflammation, it was discomfort, it was headaches, migraines, nausea, flu-like symptoms. And again, this stuff lasted on and off over the course of years. So this is not a quick process, at least it certainly wasn't for me, and I imagine it's not for many of us. So this energy will start to rise, and then what it does is there's an awakening process in which we awaken to what? The nature of reality, right? So there's the external nature of reality, which I would call the matrix, which is the, I'm trying to stay away from politics and economics and all that, but I can't. So essentially what man has created in order to control and structure human life force. So political systems, all of them, governments, all of them, corporations, economic systems, whatever it is. If man generally creates it, it's there to harness and streamline the flow of life force. That is the fundamental purpose of it, okay? So, and I'm not saying this is bad, by the way. I'm simply saying it's where the individual has to get unstuck. And when I get into the signs associated with Kundalini, this will make a little more sense. So it's to become unstuck from the matrix, from the construct. So that is one form of awakening. And for me, that's kind of the early stages of awakening. Now, the latter stages of awakening are when, let's say, more psychic elements of your being, clairvoyance, clairaudience, more subtle, I guess, subtle abilities start to awaken up. And again, that's the woo-woo of awakening. And again, it is unimportant. It is as unimportant as the outside construct is in the big picture here, right? So ultimately, through this yoking, this yoga, this connection of the mind back into the body, this merger into one, what essentially is happening is that we start to honor the flow as it moves through us. Now, this is the goal of Kundalini yoga and all these different systems, is that they aid an individual in this process of honoring the flow of life force as it moves through you. You start to operate, and this is the true definition of waking as I perceive it, you operate from your inner authority as opposed to an external authority. If somebody is mandating something and telling you have to do something to your body, is that an external authority or internal authority? Okay, so just keep that in the back of your mind. This could be about food, medicine, whatever it may be. That's an external authority dictating to you what's good for you, where you inhabit the form always, 100% of the time, from birth to death, okay? So what is the more powerful aspect to your existence? The external authority? Well, that is your slavery. You cease being a slave as the Kundalini awakens, as you become more aware, because you can see this. You start to see this polarity, this dynamic, this usurping of your life force. Okay, so inner authority, keep that in mind. All right, so let me go ahead and share with you some person's astrology chart, which, where is it at here? There we go. All right, so some person's astrology chart, it's what we're going to look at when we're looking at the planets as it relates to Kundalini is, first planet is Saturn, second planet, Uranus, And the third planet is Pluto. Okay, so, and what's relevant here is when we're discerning an individual's life path, yes, the sun, Venus, Mercury, Mars, the moon, all these, Jupiter, etc. All these planets are personal planets, and they're being refined in the process. As we start to become more and more refined as a human being, the expression of this individual's Pisces sun, let's say, becomes more refined as well. And so the higher aspects of what it is to be a Piscean then expresses. Okay, so those are what manifest. Now, the reason Saturn, Pluto, well, Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto, and to some extent Chiron, are the planets I associate with Kundalini. And again, I got this content from evolutionary astrology. Just if you want to go down the rabbit hole a little deeper, you can look into evolutionary astrology. So the reason those are associated with it have to do with the fact that all the personal planets, which are the sun, the moon, Venus, Mars, whatever, all those personal planets are kind of transform with you. They're along for the ride, right? So now the outer planets, along with Saturn to some degree, they act as forces almost that seem to be operating without the individual's awareness. They operate more kind of like in the background. So because these planets are operating in the background, we may not see the connection all the time. Like Pluto is one example. So Pluto, you really have to step back because the planet is so far out in the solar system. You really have to step back and take in the perspective. And the perspective is as from a distance. Like, how has this planet and it's the archetypical energies associated with this planet, how have they manifested in my life from very early in life to very later in life? All right, so they're not real easy. It's not really easy to pin down. It's more, you need that broader perspective. So so now let me go ahead and start with Saturn. I'm going to bring up Chiron a little bit as well. So this individual has Saturn sitting in the 7th house, very close to the 8th house cusp. I had an astrologer one time tell me that that is the Tantra placement, because it's relationships, right? 7th house is the other relationships as it merges into the 8th house, which is, it's about power, it's about sexuality, it's the sort of scorpionic Martian-like energies, which are very driven, and they want to keep going deeper, deeper, and deeper, and deeper. So this individual, you can make the statement of, okay, because the moon is also sitting there, and these are both sitting in Cancer. And again, I don't want to over define this, but basically what we have here is we have Saturn creating a constriction on the moon, on the emotional body, on the emotional needs. So there may be a feeling of being deprived, right? So what does Saturn do? So in your chart, when you're looking at Saturn, whatever house it's sitting in, whatever planet it's connected to, think about contraction and restriction. That's really the best way to see it. And people will say, oh, it's about discipline, it's about this, it's about that. It's really about contraction and restriction. Why? Because Saturn is here a bit like gravity. It's here to pull us down to Earth. And it's a spiritual planet. People don't want to see it as that, like everyone gets really pissy about Saturn because of the pain, fear, and suffering aspect. No, the reality is that Saturn is a spiritual planet. It's grounding us onto the material plane, and it will keep giving us pain, fear, suffering. In this person's case, emotional discomfort, the feeling of restriction, the inability to open up. There's going to be a deep, deep, deep need for intimacy here. You can see this as it sits so within the 8th house, that moon, that Saturn sitting very, very close to that, that border between the 8th and the 7th. And because of that conjunction between the moon and Saturn, like I said, there's going to be, for this individual, a strong restriction on their emotional body in a lot of ways. So there may be issues with mom, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to get into all the details, but again, so why is Saturn associated with Kundalini? So as long as we are engaged, anchored into the material plane, because Saturn is also related to the structures man creates. 10th house, Capricorn energies, right? So the structures man creates. These are the energies that we are being, like I said, we're being contracted, restricted, and forced to focus on the Earth and focus on what needs to get done. So hence discipline, responsibility. Those are more the sort of what I would consider positive aspects of Saturn. Okay, so but once the discipline and the responsibility are functioning, and as the person starts to awaken, they start to, let's say, do yoga, tai chi, qigong, and again, it's the spiritual processes that are going to awaken this individual, because all of astrology, to some extent, the personal planets are not necessarily about spirituality. I mean, they can lead you to those conclusions, spiritual conclusions, but it's really the outer planets that more reflect spirituality and hence Kundalini. So as the individual, the person starts to see, hey, I was caught up in this social construct or that social construct, or I got obsessed with money, or, various insecurities, et cetera, et cetera. As I start to awaken to these things through the awareness process, Saturn ceases to be this force which restricts, right? So so this is where Chiron might come in a little bit here. So Chiron is a funny planetoid that moves between, essentially, in a very odd elliptical style orbit that moves between Saturn and Uranus. Saturn, like I said before, is this restriction and the contraction, and it forces the individual to look out onto the material plane. It's a bit like a box, right? Think about Saturn as a box. It's another way to see it. Uranus is the planet of individuation, right? The rebellion. Everyone talks about Uranus is about rebellion. It's about technology. It's about this. It's about that. It is, and it can be about lightning fast changes in one's life. And again, all these lightning fast changes are moments of really quick, rapid inspiration, so that the individual can see, oh, hey, I can see how I was stuck there. I saw how I was stuck in this belief or this idea or this construct, right? So Uranus is one of the planet that represents the individuation process, how the individual can step back and see the construct, the social construct clearly. So now Chiron moves between those. Now Chiron represents this wound, right? So the wound, people say, oh, it's the wounded healer. Not necessarily. I mean, once you kind of evolve this wound and you understand this wound, oftentimes individuals who are evolving this wound start to do this as work, let's say, right? So we'll use an example here. So we got this Chiron in the 4th house. I don't want to get into the conjunction with Jupiter, that adds something else. But so the Chiron in the 4th house, you could say, okay, well, what's 4th house? 4th house is the moon. We talked a little bit about the moon already. 4th house is home. 4th house is all those sorts of things, right? So it's where you satisfy your emotional needs. So home, mother, etc. And so those emotional needs for this individual were not satisfied early in life. That's one of the things you can say about Chiron. So Chiron tends to impact people earlier in life. So there was a deprivation of emotional needs here, right? So again, lots of deprivation of emotional stuff with this individual. And so as this individual, again, operates through awareness, starts to find out where true home is, right? Where the individual can stop being a victim, they can start seeing how they can satisfy their emotional needs from within, right? Inner authority. But they realize ultimately the story here of Chiron in the 4th house is to recognize that home is here. It's here, it's in the body. Anywhere you go, home goes with you, okay? So keep that in mind. So Chiron will like I said, will aid in this evolutionary process once you can recognize the nature of the initial wound, right? So now moving on to Uranus. So as the wound starts to heal, this idea, this individual finds that home truly lies here, Kundalini starts to activate even more, right? They're further integrating into their form, further integrating into their body, because it's home, true home. There's no more fantasies about living here and living there, because they're here. It's here all the time. So what ends up happening is the individuation process starts to happen. And once the individual can recognize again how they get caught up in the construct, then they become, well, much more of an individual. The more individual you are, the less you the less you waste life force on things that don't matter, right? So things that don't matter, working too hard, trying to chase money, again, trying to deal with all those sort of Saturnian insecurities. The Saturn will create this like force that, oh, I got to be successful, I got to achieve this stature, or, you know, whatever it may be. And again, I'm not saying those things aren't good. I mean, those are things that we refine over the course of this life, but in the context of Kundalini awakening, those are the distractions. So the individual, Uranus, starts to wake to these things. And then what ends up happening is that Pluto starts to come into play. And of course, all these planets are operating on some level simultaneously, okay? So Pluto, essentially what Pluto is, it's a very deep, like I said, background. And from the context, well, operates very, very deeply in the background. But from the context of evolutionary astrology, looking from that perspective, the idea is that Pluto is essentially transforming us over time so that we not only become more authentic in our expression, more authentic in our life path, but also essentially we're working through soul's karma. Soul's karma. So let me give you a quick example. We have this 9th house Pluto here. So 9th house Pluto. What's interesting, you have to look at, again, this is from evolutionary astrology's perspective, the house that is opposite to Pluto is also incredibly relevant in that it is one of the ways in which we're evolving in this lifetime. So if Pluto represents your soul's karma coming into this life, soul's karma is that which you are, you're kind of innately connected to. So in this case, this individual has their Pluto in the 9th house. 9th house represents, we'll just keep it very generic, high-mindedness. So philosophy, spirit, you know, belief, spiritual belief. It's about abstraction, abstract ideas, but it's about bringing the abstraction down and bringing it out onto the earth plane, because everything has to function through a polarity here. So you can't simply be like spiritual and abstract without any sort of, well, having an application, I guess, unless this person wanted to become a monk, right? So if they wanted to be a monk, then the communication and how to express this abstraction would be less of an issue, perhaps. However, this person is not a monk. So what becomes relevant and important here is the 3rd house, which is the house that is opposite to the 9th house. That is what they would call the Pluto polarity point. That is the point which is evolving in this lifetime. So how do you get high-mindedness, an attachment, a stubborn attachment to one's beliefs as absolute, which is an issue that people with 9th house Plutos have to get past, is that you have to be able to look at other people's beliefs as relevant as well. But again, it's a lot of high-mindedness, higher education, intelligence, things along those lines. But what it's evolving through is the 3rd house. The 3rd house needs to express that energy outward, right? So as this starts to happen, saying, okay, this individual has all this abstraction, okay, I need to communicate this in a more clear way, right? In a more clear way, throat. So the energy starts to manifest in a more easily, well, it's flowing. So the energy starts to flow when the individual all of a sudden well, how do I say this? So the 9th house Pluto will give the individual the feeling that they're not understood. So they could feel isolated and sort of disconnected from the population at large. However, when they realize, hey, I can communicate through writing or speaking or whatever it is, that what ends up happening is that life force starts to flow better, right? So Kundalini awakening is everything. It's not some sort of mysterious energy that doesn't exist, right? Or doesn't exist within the body already. It's essentially, we're streamlining the flow. We're becoming less wasteful with how we utilize this energy. So when this individual realizes, hey, I can communicate abstraction in a way which others can understand, then all of a sudden there's a big success there. And the energy life force starts to move more freely, and other aspects of this person's awareness will start to awaken. And that's basically how it works. And another way to kind of look at this is that and is money, let's say, right? So when somebody is terrified of not having money, right? So terrified of not having money, Saturn, insecure, etc. And then they say, okay, well, I need to learn how to make money. So they, what do? They generally reflect on their father, right? So they always say, well, the father is who teaches you how to make money, et cetera, et cetera. Again, these are traditional roles. Don't get, I know women earn money, et cetera, but I'm talking about astrology, which we're talking about 10th house relative to the father, which is stature and sort of like your placement with your career, et cetera. So we're supposed to supposedly learn that from our fathers. So again, Saturnian energy. So we look towards our father, external authority. Saturn is always getting you to look at an external authority. Uranus comes along. We start to heal our wounds, Chiron. Uranus comes along. The individual says, oh, I can't earn money like that. That's not how my energy flows. That's not comfortable for me. That I exhaust myself earning money like my father earned his money, right? So inner authority. How do I honor the flow of energy within myself? And then whatever you got to do, you have to honor those things, right? So you honor, hey, I need to work less, or you honor just changing your career, or whatever it may be. So Uranus, that individuation process, starts to express. And again, now we talk about Pluto, which is the sort of the deep refining that happens over the long term. In this particular case, it's about abstraction, high-mindedness, belief, etc., being transformed in a way in which the individual can communicate it in a common sense kind of way. And that is Kundalini awakening, as I perceive it through the lens of astrology. So hopefully this video is helpful. If you need a chart reading, anything like that, I do human design, I do, obviously various forms of astrology, etc. Or if you have questions about sexual energy or, your energy flow and vitality in general, feel free to reach out. My website posted down below the video. Thank you much.